Montana Territory, June 1882, the first time Quentin Nash saw her. She was standing barefoot on the splintering edge of a half-collapsed bridge, wedding veil tangled in the wind, dress torn and mudded like she had wrestled a mountain and won. "Ma'am," Quentin called out, his hand resting on the butt of his revolver, not from suspicion, just habit. "You planning to jump, or are you just enjoying the view?" The woman spun around. Her face was flushed, wild-eyed, strands of dark hair stuck to her cheeks. She looked like she had run through hell and not stopped once to breathe. "I am not jumping," she snapped, one hand gripping the wooden post behind her. "The bridge is broken. I can see that." She stared at him hard, trying to size him up. His horse shifted behind him, snorting. Quentin took a step forward, careful not to spook her. The ravine beneath the collapsed bridge was deep, lined with jagged rocks and the slow-moving creek far below. "I need to get across," she said, voice thin, like she hated needing anything. Quentin tipped his hat back. "You came from the town," she hesitated. "I came from a church." He looked closer. The gown was white once, now stained with dirt, the hem torn clear up one side. Her shoes were gone. The veil hung from one side of her head, caught in a loose braid. "Runaway bride," he said softly. She did not deny it. Quentin stepped to the edge of the bridge, gauging the damage. The middle planks had collapsed inward, hanging like broken ribs. The far side was barely holding. He looked at her again. "You picked a hell of a way to go," he said. "There is nothing past this bridge but open country and a mining camp 30 miles west." "I was not planning to come this way," she said. "Plans changed." Quentin held out a hand. "Well, come on then. You look like you could use a better plan." She stared at his hand, then took it slowly. Her fingers were scraped and cold. He guided her back onto solid ground. "I am Quentin Nash," he said, once her feet were steady. "Brielle Nolan," he nodded. "You all right?" No, they stood in silence for a beat. Wind rustled the grass. A meadowlark let out a cry from somewhere near the creek. "You got someone chasing you?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "Not anymore." Quentin did not press. He knew that look when someone had seen too much and said too little. He untied his canteen, handed it to her. She drank, slow at first, then fast, like she had not had water in hours. "I have a place not far," he said. "Cabin, you can rest, then figure out what you want to do." Brielle hesitated. "I'm not offering anything but help," he added. She nodded once. He helped her onto his horse. She winced as she swung her leg over. "You hurt?" he asked. "Just bruises." Quentin led the horse on foot, letting her rest. It was a quiet walk. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the pines. His cabin came into view as the sky turned amber. Smoke curled from the chimney. He had left the fire smoldering before riding out. He helped Brielle down. She limped slightly but said nothing. Inside, the place was simple wood walls, stone hearth, one bed, one chair, a table, and a small shelf of books. A rifle hung above the door. "You live alone?" she asked, standing in the doorway. "I do." She stepped inside slowly, as if waiting for something to snap. "You can take the bed," he said. "I will sleep out here by the hearth." Brielle looked at him. Something in her eyes started to soften just a little. "I will clean up first," she said. He nodded. "There is water in the basin. I will bring more." By the time Quentin came back with a fresh bucket, she had washed the dirt from her face and arms. Her dress hung from a nail, drying by the fire. She wore one of his shirts, now too big, sleeves rolled. "You can have it," he said. She looked down at the shirt. "Thank you." That night, she lay curled on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Quentin sat by the fire, watching the flames. She spoke quietly. "I was supposed to marry a man named Roy Harlan. My father arranged it. He is 20 years older than me. Rich. Mean." Quentin listened. "He locked the door on me when I tried to leave, said I was his now. I broke the window, ran." He turned to look at her. Her face was pale in the firelight. "I thought if I could just reach the bridge, I could get away." "I did not know it had collapsed." "You made it," he said. "I saw you." Quentin shifted. "I was tracking a fox. Never thought I would find a bride out there." She gave the smallest laugh. "You are calm for a man who just picked up someone else's bride." "I do not want someone else's," he said simply. Their eyes met across the room. Neither of them looked away. The next morning, Brielle was up before the sun, boiling water for coffee in the tin pot. Quentin rubbed sleep from his eyes and watched her move barefoot across the wooden floor. Her bruises were beginning to fade. Her eyes were clearer. I want to work, she said, pouring 2 cups. I cannot just sit here. You can do whatever you want, he said. I want to stay. He met her eyes. Then stay. That day she helped him chop wood, feed the chickens, and clean the storage shed. She laughed once when the rooster pecked at her foot. Quentin looked over, startled by the sound. I have not laughed in months, she said, still smiling. He grinned, wiping sweat from his brow. You should do it more. That night they sat on the porch, watching the stars come out. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I do not know what comes next, she whispered. He slid his hand over hers. We take the first step. Toward what? Whatever forever looks like. She lifted her head. With you, his voice was quiet. Yes, with me. Brielle looked at him for a long moment, then leaned in and kissed him slow, certain, no hesitation. And just like that, the first step was taken. By late June, the first wild roses bloomed along the fence line, pale and fragrant. Quentin had never paid much mind to them before. Now he watched Brielle pause to touch one, her fingers careful, reverent. She didn't speak as she worked, never did unless there was something worth saying, but when she looked at him over her shoulder, sun lighting the curve of her cheek, it settled something deep in his chest. She'd taken to wearing one of his flannel shirts tied at the waist, skirt made from an old feed sack she'd sewn into something passable. Her hands had healed, though she still favored her left side when lifting anything heavier than a sack of oats. That morning, Quentin had ridden into Jordan Gulch to pick up salt and nails. He hadn't told her he'd also asked after a woman with dark hair and a torn wedding dress, but no one had seen anything. Roy Harlan's name hadn't passed a single lip. It left him uneasy, but he didn't say so. Brielle met him by the corral when he returned. You were gone longer than I thought, she said, brushing straw from her skirt. Had to wait on the blacksmith to finish with someone else's mule, he said, tying off the reins. Horse threw a shoe, she nodded, eyes flicking to the saddlebag. Did you find lye, enough to make soap for the season? She took the bag from his hands. Good, I'm down to scraps. Quentin watched her disappear inside. He didn't follow right away. The sun hung low behind the hills, casting the prairie in amber. When he finally stepped into the cabin, she had already laid out supper beans with bits of salt pork and cornbread browned over the fire. They ate without much talk until she set her spoon down and wiped the corner of her mouth. I want to earn a place here, she said. Not just be taken in. You already have a place, Quentin said, voice steady. I need more than kindness, she said. I need to be useful. You are, every day. She looked down at her hands. I could stitch for the town, there's a need. I saw a girl last week in a dress held together with twine. He folded his arms across the table. You want to go back to town? I want to walk into it on my own terms. Quentin thought on that. Then I'll hitch the wagon tomorrow. We'll go early. She relaxed, just slightly, but didn't smile. That night, she folded a stack of muslin she'd salvaged from a trunk in the shed. When she caught him watching, she sat beside him on the floor and drew her knees up. I used to think quiet meant danger, she said. In my father's house, silence came before something broke. Quentin didn't speak. But this place, she glanced around the cabin. It breathes different. He rested his palm against her shoulder. Because no one's waiting to break anything here. Her voice was barely above a breath. You are nothing like them. I hope not. No, she said. You listen when there's nothing to say. He didn't answer. Just let his hand fall to hers, warm and calloused. The next morning they set off before the heat rose. Brielle sat beside him on the wagon seat, a wrapped bundle of cloth and thread tucked in her lap. She didn't wear the veil anymore, or the dress. She'd stitched herself a new skirt from flour sacks and dyed it with walnut hulls until it turned the color of river mud. As they crested the ridge, the town came into view, dusty, sun-baked, with its single street lined by storefronts and a livery stable. Quentin pulled the team to a stop outside the mercantile. You want me to come with you? He asked. Her fingers tightened around the bundle. No. I need to do this myself. He nodded and watched her step down, spine straight, chin lifted like she'd never known fear. He stayed with the horses, arms crossed, eyes on the door she disappeared through. She was gone the better part of an hour. When she came out again, her cheeks were flushed, but her steps were steady. Well, he asked. They'll take 4 shirts and 2 children's dresses to start, she said as she climbed back up beside him. Payment in sugar and flour. Quentin gave a small nod. That's fair. She looked out over the town. A girl stopped me in there, said she liked my skirt, asked if I could make one for her. He raised an eyebrow. I said yes, she added. They rode home in silence, the wind lifting strands of her hair as she looked out over the grasslands. When they reached the cabin, she didn't go inside. Instead, she walked to the edge of the field where the first corn shoots were pushing through the dirt. Quentin joined her there. I didn't know I could be this person, she said. He didn't reply, just reached down and plucked a weed from between the rows. She turned to him. I thought the best I could do was survive. You're doing more than that, her hand found his. I want to keep building this. He looked at her then, really looked. You still sure? About staying? I'm not running anymore, she said, and he believed her. The sewing table Quentin built for her sat beneath the west window, where the last light of day stretched long across the floorboards. Brielle leaned over it now, fitting sleeves to the shoulders of a girl's bodice, her hair pinned back with a sliver of bone she'd whittled smooth herself. The room smelled faintly of lard soap and pressed cotton. Quentin came in from the barn, wiping his hands with a scrap of flour sack. He watched her a moment, the quiet rhythm of her needle, the way she pressed her lips when the thread tangled. That for the girl in town? He asked. She asked for blue, Brielle said. Closest I had was a faded indigo apron someone left behind in the shed. Took some coaxing, but the weaves held. He nodded, setting the folded rag on the table's edge. I was thinking, come frost, we could run a line of traps down Hollow Creek. Mink's been moving through again. I've never trapped, she said, not looking up. Then I'll show you. She paused, finger resting on a seam. I used to think learning meant someone watching for you to fail. Wasn't the right teacher. Her eyes met his. I know that now. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters once, then stilled. That evening, Quentin brought in a parcel wrapped in brown paper and twine. He set it on the hearth without a word. She waited, curious but quiet, until he nudged it toward her boot toe. Go on, he said. Inside, she found a length of soft calico in deep plum and a pair of iron sewing shears with her initials carved into the handle. She held the cloth to her cheek. Where did you find this? Traded with a peddler passing through Fort Shaw. He owed me for shoeing his mule last winter. I never had shears that cut clean, she said, voice low. You do now. She didn't thank him, she didn't have to. The way she folded the fabric, careful and slow, said more than words. Later, they sat on the porch, a thin breeze carrying the scent of pine resin and grass gone golden. Quentin sanded a fence rail smooth while Brielle stitched along the hem of the plum calico, her feet tucked beneath her. You ever think about putting up a second room? She asked. For what? She didn't look at him. A proper place for sleeping, yours and mine. He set the rail aside. You want that? I think I do. Then I'll start cutting lumber in the morning, she nodded, and maybe a window on the east side. So we can see the sun come in. I'll make it wide, he said. They sat in silence, the kind that felt settled, like stones sunk deep into riverbed. When the first frost came, it turned the morning grass brittle underfoot. Brielle stepped outside in a shawl she'd pieced together from worn flannel, watching the sky lighten over the ridge. Quentin was already at the woodpile, axe ringing with each strike. She crossed to him, tugging her shawl tighter. About that second room, she said. I've been thinking. He paused, leaning on the axe handle. I want it to be ours, together, not mine, not yours. Quentin studied her face. You sure? I am, he nodded once. We'll start today. By midday, he had the frame set and she was sorting nails. She passed him boards one by one, hands steady, the two of them moving without needing to speak much. When her thumb caught a splinter, he took her hand, pulled it gently free, and kissed the spot before letting go. That night, the stars came out sharp and pale. He brought the quilt from the bed and laid it out on the grass. They lay shoulder to shoulder, watching Orion rise above the trees. I used to think I'd never belong anywhere, she said. You do, he answered. She turned to him. I want to marry you, Quentin. His breath caught. He didn't move. You sure? He asked. I've never been surer of anything. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. Then we'll marry, she smiled, slow and certain. Under the dark, clear sky, with the frost clinging to the grass and the world holding still, it felt like the last piece of something long broken had finally been set right. The wedding took place at the edge of the clearing, beneath the cottonwood that leaned eastward like it had been listening to the wind too long. Quentin trimmed a circle into the tall grass with his scythe, and Brielle stitched a ribbon of walnut-dyed muslin for her hair. There was no preacher, only the land and the sky and the two of them speaking vows in plain language, not for show, but because they meant them. Afterward, Quentin slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger when he'd traded a pair of beaver pelts for up near the Judith River. It caught a bit of light when she held up her hand. "I never thought I'd wear one of these," she said, fingers curling slightly, like the weight of it surprised her. "You'll get used to it," Quentin said. "It's not meant to be heavy." They shared bread and smoked venison, sitting on the porch steps with their boots touching. No one else was there to see it, but nothing about the day felt lacking. By late afternoon, Quentin hitched the wagon and they rode out to gather pine saplings for the new fencing that would stretch past the corn rows. The sky was pale and cloudless, the kind that made everything feel closer to the bone. Brielle kept her hand resting on his knee as they rode, quiet but steady, like she was anchoring herself to the moment. "You ever think of children?" she asked, not looking at him. He took a breath before answering. "Sometimes, yes, but I figured that door was closed." "It isn't," she said. He waited for more, but she didn't add anything. The wagon creaked over the ruts, and he kept one hand on the reins, the other resting palm up on the bench between them. Eventually, her fingers found his again. They worked until dusk, stacking the saplings in neat bundles. She tied them off with twine, her sleeves rolled past the elbow, not minding the resin that stuck to her skin. When they returned home, they found a rabbit curled on the porch, ears twitching but unafraid. Quentin crouched low. "He's bold," he said. "He's young," Brielle replied. "They don't learn fear until it's taught." Inside, the fire burned low. She poured water from the kettle and soaked the cloth she used to wipe her hands clean. He watched her from the table, chin resting on his palm. "I heard a story once," she said, wringing out the cloth. "About a woman who made a new life by lying about her name. She said the old one belonged to someone she didn't recognize anymore." "And did it work?" he asked. For a while, she turned toward him. "But I don't want to forget my name. I want to be known and still be safe." "You are," he said. "I know who you are." She came to him then, taking his hand and placing it flat against her chest. Her heart beat slow and sure beneath his fingers. "Then that's enough," she said. Through the window, the moon rose pale and full, casting a long line of light across the floorboards. They stood together without speaking, the fire giving off only a soft hush. He kissed her with the kind of patience that had grown between them, earned, not taken. Her hands settled at his waist, not pulling, just holding. When they moved to the bed, it wasn't rushed. It was the kind of closeness that didn't need naming, only sharing. In the quiet that followed, her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm on his collarbone. "I used to pray someone would find me," she said. "You weren't lost," he whispered. She gave a small hum. "I was waiting then." He reached for the quilt and pulled it over them both, tucking it around her back. "You're home now." Outside, coyotes called in the far distance, and the wind moved gently through the trees. The world didn't stop. But inside that cabin, something had settled into place that would not be undone. The first snow came early that year, wet and heavy, clinging to the eaves and weighing down the pine boughs until they bowed toward the earth. Quentin rose before the light and carried an extra firewood, his boots leaving prints across the porch that vanished by midday. Brielle stayed indoors, working by lamplight on a quilt pieced from worn shirts and scraps of toweling. The pattern wasn't precise, but the warmth in it came from knowing where every bit had come from sleeves Quentin had worn through. Old sacks they'd hauled grain in, the hem of the plum calico she'd worn the day they married. Late in the afternoon, as the snow thickened outside, she set down her needle and stood beside the window, her hand resting on the glass. Quentin sat across the room, carving a new handle for her sewing shears after the old one had split. "I keep thinking of my mother," she said without turning. "She used to hum when she needed bread, said it made the dough more forgiving." Quentin looked up. "You miss her. She died when I was 15. Consumption. She was kind but quiet about it. I think she'd have liked this place." He set down the handle and wiped his hands on a rag. "Then she'd have liked the woman you've become." Brielle gave a small nod. "I think maybe I'm starting to like her too." That night, they shared a pot of onion broth and rye bread, then sat by the hearth with her quilt spread across both their laps. She traced a seam with her finger. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run," she said. Quentin didn't answer right away. He added a split of pine to the fire, watching it catch. "You don't owe your past anything," he said at last. "But you owe yourself peace." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I've got that now." By midwinter, the fields were buried, and the path between the cabin and the barn had to be cleared twice daily. Brielle took to writing letters for the townsfolk. In exchange for flour and lamp oil, those who couldn't hold a pen steady or spell a sentence, but wanted to send word to sons gone east or cousins in Dakota Territory. One afternoon, after she'd returned from delivering a letter to the blacksmith's widow, she found Quentin bent over the table, drawing a sketch of a small lean-to attached to the side of the barn. "What's that?" she asked, brushing snow from her shawl. "Place to keep a milk cow come spring," he said. "Figured if we're going to stay, might as well stop trading for butter." She stepped closer, looking at the lines he'd drawn. "You thinking Jersey or Shorethorn?" He looked up, surprised. "You know breeds." "My mother kept a Shorethorn named Mercy." "Stubborn as a stump, but sweet," Quentin grinned. "Shorethorn, then." As the wind howled outside, they began to plan how to extend the garden rows, where to dig a root cellar, how many hands it would take to raise a chicken coop. Each idea added another stone to the life they were building, slow and solid. Spring came late, but when it did, the fields turned green so fast it felt like watching breath return to the land. Brielle planted carrots, snow peas, and flax, her hands in the dirt before the frost had fully lifted. Quentin built the lean-to, then rode to a neighboring homestead to barter for a calf born early. In the evenings, they sat outside with mugs of chicory and watched the sky shift from gold to slate. Brielle spoke less now of the woman she'd once been and more of what she wanted to learn: how to smoke meat properly, how to turn flax into linen, how to harness a team. One day, as Quentin dug post holes for the expanded fence, she called to him from the porch, a folded scrap of paper in her hand. "I got a reply," she said, "from my cousin Rachel back in Missouri." He wiped the sweat from his brow and crossed the yard. She wrote she always wondered what happened to me, said she'd worried, but no one ever told her the truth. "You going to write back?" "I already did. Told her I'm safe." "Happy? Married?" Quentin took the paper from her and tucked it in his shirt pocket. "Then she knows all she needs." That summer, the first tomatoes ripened, and the calf named Mercy, in quiet tribute, learned to nuzzle Brielle's hand through the fence. They built the root cellar, painted the cabin door with leftover wagon enamel, and strung a new clothesline between two cottonwoods. One warm evening, as they shelled peas on the porch, Quentin leaned back and looked at her with a quiet smile. "I never thought I'd live like this," he said. She reached across the bowl and took his hand. "We made it from scratch." They slept that night with the window open, the breeze stirring the edge of the quilt. Her hand found his beneath the covers. "I want to try for a child," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes searching hers. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Then we will." Life unfolded gently after that, days of work and quiet joy, of shared burdens and small triumphs. The seasons turned, and the cabin grew into a home where nothing had to be hidden or feared. On a mild morning the following spring, a baby girl was born with a full head of dark hair and a cry that filled the room like wind through tall grass. Quentin held her against his chest, stunned by the weight of her, while Brielle smiled through tears, her hand resting on his wrist. They named her Cora, after Brielle's mother. That summer, townsfolk from Jordan Gulch came out for a potluck, bringing bread and preserves, and watched as Quentin strung up a swing for Cora beneath the cottonwood. Brielle served rhubarb pie and showed off the dresses she'd sewn for the neighbors' children. No one asked where she'd come from, only how she'd made the crust so flaky years past, and the land kept giving. Cora grew strong and clever, with her father's quiet and her mother's steel. The fields doubled, the barn held more than just Mercy, and the house gained another room, this one with shelves for books, and a cradle built by Quentin's own hand. At night, after the lamp was blown out and the fire banked low, Quentin and Brielle lay beneath their quilt, their fingers loosely intertwined. The silence was deep, but never lonely. They had lived through hunger, cold, and fear and found each other on the other side. And in the soft dark of their home, with wind in the trees and their daughter breathing steady in the next room, they knew the life they'd built would hold. Always.